Welcome. I'm Greg from Greg's Tutoring NYC. There's a link at the bottom if you want to contact me. This is about the 12th poem that I'm analyzing. Um, I have a link to the other ones and future ones I'm going to do here at the bottom. So if you go to GregsTutoringNYC.com/SHSAT-poetry, you'll get a link to them. My main focus is on two exams. One is the SHSAT, which is for admissions to the New York City specialized high schools. And the other related to that is the Hunter College High School exam, which is also in New York City. This can obviously apply to other exams and even non-exams. I'm trying to focus on literacy and hitting home the literary concepts, author's craft, and things like that, using poetry. I have other links to other videos and all other stuff as well, but this series is focusing on this level of poetry. All right. So, in particular, I've pulled this At Dusk poem from the 2025 New York City DOE SHSAT handbook. At the time I'm doing this, the handbook is like semi-officially available. It's been distributed to some of the students, and it is available on the website in kind of an esoteric place. Anybody who needs to know, they can email me at GregsTutoringNYC.com. I'm not really going to explore where to get the link from. At one point, it's going to be in the standard place, which is schools.nyc.gov/SHS under the documents part. Again, if you need to get a link to all this, definitely email me. And a major thing is that handbook, the 2025 handbook, is mainly a repeat of a previous one. So there's really nothing to see there except for this poem. All right. There is a few other questions, but the main thing is the poem. All right. So we're going to do as we did on the other dozen poems here. We're going to try to rip this guy apart and do an analysis and then answer some questions. Now, not only do we have the SHSAT questions, but it turns out this poem was also given, I think it was the 2019 grade 7 New York State exam on the short response questions. So it won't be multiple choice, but what I'm going to do is either make this in three parts, which is the analysis, then the SHSAT questions, and then New York State questions, or one big one, or split it in two, which is the poem, the analysis, plus the SHSAT questions, or a second one, which is the New York City one. Let's see how long these end up being, and I'll merge them all at the end somehow, if need be. But it's basically three parts: the analysis, the SHSAT questions, and the New York State questions. The SHSAT one's going to be all multiple choice, and the New York State ones are little paragraphs and little essays you're supposed to write as the answer to. On the SHSAT ones, we're going to stay in the same mode we've been in on the other poems. And for the New York State one, we're really just going to have a discussion. I'm not going to write an essay. And like what if I remember, one of the questions is about tone, and we're going to talk about some of that as we're exploring it from the SHSAT perspective as well. All right, so with that note, let's try to get in here. The name of the poem is At Dusk. So something is happening at dusk. Okay. Um, so we're gonna explore this as if, certainly in my case, as if I'm reading this for the very first time. Okay. Um, and I'm gonna raise issues as I go along, trying to understand the poem. At the same time, I'm looking for literary devices, in particular for the poem. I'm looking for repetition. I'm looking for rhymes. Looking for similes and metaphors. And by the way, this is some things you should do with non-poems as well. I'm looking for any consistency that the author is going to throw at us. There's certain patterns in here. For instance, if we do this here line, we're noticing down here that the author also is dashing around the phrases. And I think the author does that a third time as well. We'll cover that when we see it. Yeah, so we're trying to look for those literary devices and author's craft, things that the author does to give us the leg up to understanding it, okay? And then there's also the non-poem things, like turning points, um, climaxes in the story, the tone, the author's point of view, what the main idea is as a whole, all those kind of things like that. So let's start reading this and see what we can kind of figure out. Um, at first I think she was calling a child. So I'm left saying, who is she? Okay, and who is the child? My neighbor. All right, so the neighbor is the she. But first, I think my neighbor is calling a child, leaning through her doorway at dusk. Street lamps just starting to hum the backdrop of evening. So if we kind of stop here, it's the end of the day. All right, somebody is leaning out, calling somebody. According to the author, it seems to be maybe their child. Um, and it's evening, so the lights are on and the street lights are humming, and it's kind of a classic scenario. So this does not sound like they're in the middle of a farm. It's probably either a small town or a bona fide city, as New York City is. A lot of the people viewing this are going to be taking the SHSAT, which is a New York City exam. So we can all kind of get the hum of a street lamp, kind of a thing. Um, then I hear the high pitched wheedling we send out to animals who know only sound. So that little one there is a footnote. So we should be able to go to the bottom and see that wheedling is speaking in a flattering manner. Okay. I find this definition is not quite as full as it needs to be. Um, Normally, it's not just flattering, but we're trying to like convince or coax somebody into some sort of scenario. All right, so let's see what might be happening there that is flattering or coaxing or something like that. Okay, so then I hear the high pitched wheedling we send out to animals who know only sounds, not the meaning of words, here, here, nor how they sometimes fall short. Okay, so basically, somebody it does not sound like they're calling a child. Okay, it sounds like they're calling a dog or a cat, perhaps. Here, kitty, kitty, you know, the high voice. Here, kitty, kitty, or here, 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 you know, come boy, that kind of a thing like that. So they're trying to apparently convince an animal to come back in the house, perhaps. We don't know yet, okay? Um, in another yard, so apparently, it seems to be the story here is because they're dealing with a neighbor. Somebody is looking out the window or sitting on their back porch or in their backyard, and they're witnessing this going on, not only hearing it, but it sounds like they're partially seeing it because not only the hearing, the hear, the wheedling that's going on, but they're also seeing the woman, the neighbor, lean out of her doorway, right? So he probably opens the screen door, here, kitty, kitty, kind of a thing, right? So the person is seeing that. Otherwise, that the person's imagining it, right? So even though poems can get metaphorical and have layers of abstraction and stuff on them, I think we can kind of take this part at face value and say that that is kind of what's happening. So then, in another yard, all right. So if you will, it's almost like this is the narrator, um, and I don't know if it's like the I'm gonna put NA here, and the neighbor is here for NE, and then there's another yard over here, right? AY for another yard, or it could be the neighbor's here, or the other yard is over here. Okay, so we don't kind of know the exact setup, but there's another yard beyond my neighbor's sight. The cat lifts her ears, turns first towards the voice. What voice? The neighbor's voice going, here, kitty, kitty, and all that. Then back to the constellation of fireflies flickering near her head. Okay, so there's a little ambiguity here that where the pronoun applies to. Okay. Is the fireflies over the neighbor's head calling the cat, or is it over the cat's head? Okay. Um, but if we continue on, it says it's as if she can't decide whether to leap over the low hedge, the neat row of flowers, and bound onto the porch into the steady circle of light, or stay where she is. All right. So this is talking about the cat. All right. So the person is in their backyard, on their back porch, looking out their back window, something like that. They are witnessing the neighbor calling the cat. Apparently, it's the cat. So, um, uh, if you notice, it says, I think she's calling a child. So now we know, at least as far as the story tells us so far, that she's calling a cat. So this does not seem like the narrator is in complete knowledge of the neighbor. Or it could be the neighbor has a child and a cat, and at this point, at the point where the poem started, the narrator doesn't know she's calling the cat or the child. Okay. And the way it's written out, the cat lifts her ears. So we're told it's a cat. This is not a child at this point on these lines here. From 10 to 15 is not a child being described. It's definitely the cat. Okay. So, if we go back to 9, it says, in another yard beyond my neighbor's sight. So the neighbor can't see the cat, but the narrator can. So that's why I'm saying we don't know the perspective that the narrator has, whether they're looking up and down to the 2 yards next to them or like over the fence, just watching the whole thing unfold. And that's assuming there's even a fence, right? But the cat seems too far away. There's something blocking the vision. It's either too far or there's a fence or a wall or something. All right. So, so we're at that point. I'm going to change the color of the pen for a second to make sure, because I think this point we kind of moved on from something. I'm going to make it blue. Okay. So the cat lifts her ears, turns first towards the voice of the neighbor, then back to the constellation of fireflies flickering near her head. So it's dusk. We all know June bugs or fireflies, or is at sunset they start proliferating around. So we have that kind of thing. So it's making analogies to the stars in the sky, and there's a whole bunch of fireflies. And this is really from this point on. I'm doing this video. It's the last day of June or something. So this is about when fireflies do start. And the cat is noticing this as well. And it could be after the winter and the fall, the spring, where the cat was not witnessing these fireflies, and all of a sudden it's there. And it could be a kitten as well, so it may not have ever seen them before, right? So this, even the average person, ooh, look at the cute fireflies kind of thing. So we're not cats, but we can kind of make that association and connection with the cat, that the cat is kind of in awe of all these glittering bugs flying around, okay? So the cat lifts her ears, meaning she hears the neighbor calling, but the fireflies are in front of the cat, and the cat is like, okay, neighbor, go back to the neighbor or watch the fireflies, right? And it says she can't decide whether to leap and go back home, okay, or stay where she is and continue watching the fireflies. Luminous possibilities. So luminous deals with the light of the fireflies, but it also should be the consciousness of the cat, if you will. So if we skip over, I'm going to underline this part here. If we skip over that for a second, luminous possibility flitting before her. So the cat has to make a choice. Do I acknowledge the human and go home, or am I just keep exploring this wonder before me, which is the fireflies, the constellation of fireflies, right? And then the part in the middle says, all that would keep her away from home. All right, so that's the thing here. The fireflies are right there in front of her. It's like dangling candy in front of the cat, if you will. In the meantime, the cat's like, I can go home later. This is in front of me now, kind of a thing, right? So anyway, the cat has to make a choice, okay, whether to go home or not. And then I'm going to kind of draw a line here. So even though the author wrote this as one giant stanza, right, that's the whole poem. The questions follow it after that. There's kind of not a turning point in the sense that, oh my God, there's this climactic thing that's going to happen next, but it kind of changes tone and setting, if you will, right? And by the way, the tone right now is kind of casual. We could see ourselves in the back porch sipping iced tea or something, and all of a sudden she's watching the neighbor do this, just enjoying and relaxing a nice day. The neighbor also doesn't seem to be ecstatic or hysterical. It's not like they call on the cat like, come here now, oh my God, kind of a thing, right? So it's just a kind of a chill situation and scenario that seems to be unfolding, okay? And then the neighbor stops calling the cat. So I listen as my neighbor's voice trails off. So we have no knowledge that the cat comes home. So the neighbor, I guess, is at least for now giving up trying calling the cat back home. And it says that she's given up calling for now. Okay. Left me to imagine her inside of the house waiting, perhaps in a chair in front of the TV or walking around doing small tasks. So this also deals with we have kind of a change in setting that's moving from the thing that unfolded in the backyards, if you will, into the homes, so to speak, where the narrator is imagining the neighbor now in their house. Um, and the neighbor seems to be doing menial things, according to the person, like just watching TV, just walking around. Now, that could be pacing, could be the neighbor is kind of upset. Where's the cat? Oh my God, kind of a thing. But we have no clue that that's going on there at all. So we kind of really can't do it. And then just doing small tasks. So again, this is the end of the day. Maybe they just ate dinner. Maybe they're just cleaning up something minor. And again, they're just ready to chill further for the rest of the evening, doing stuff like watching TV and so on or whatever. Um, there is other issues here dealing with the tone, though. There's a slight notion of being lonely, that maybe the person was calling the cat for kind of their evening. Maybe she just sits down with the cat on her lap and just chills for the rest of the night, falls asleep watching TV on the couch, or whatever the case may be. And so the human is calling the cat, and at this point, kind of gave up and is accepting that the cat's eventually going to come back home. In the meantime, they're doing small tasks, just try to waste time, and they're probably going to go back out and call the cat again or something. Or at that point, the cat might be scratching at the door once it gets through the excitement of watching the fireflies and all that stuff like that. Um, and then there's kind of another thing, right? I'm going to draw like another line right here. Um, there's there's a semicolon right there. So we do have a stop there, which gives us another sentence, if you will, and it's another way to give another thought that's happening here. Again, it's not quite a turning point. I'm putting TP for turning point. It's just a movement with the story along, kind of into the next act, if you will. If we split this up into three acts, one act is the woman watching the other woman call the cat. The other is the woman goes inside and is doing menial stuff, and the neighbor is thinking, what might the neighbor be doing? The narrator is thinking that, and then the third step is this last thing, which is that it left me, being the narrator, to wonder that I too might lift my voice, sure of someone out there. They're calling it a someone, not a cat. It could be a person. Send it over the line stitching here to there. Certain the sounds I make are enough to call someone home. So this might also piggyback on that loneliness concept that first of all, it seems like the narrator has the free time to observe and watch all this. Now, this could all happen in 30 seconds, but it seems like that's a repetition kind of thing happening here in the story. That maybe uh, the narrator is thinking that the neighbor might be lonely because the narrator is lonely. And not only is the narrator watching the neighbor doing this wheedling, um, but the author is starting to think they themselves like, hey, what if I had somebody to call home? So the implication is that maybe the narrator lives alone as well. And it might be nice to be able to call um, you know, an animal or a person back for myself as well. All right. So that's kind of what's going on here with some of this, right? So that's part of um what we need to be looking at or into, right? So there's kind of a couple levels to this. Um One is to realize what the setting is going on here. So the whole uh, poem in and of itself is kind of very relaxing. There's a relaxing tone, but there's also a tone of this loneliness, perhaps stuck in the middle of it. Um, there's a couple levels of curiosity here. One is the curiosity of the cat watching the fireflies, and also having to make a decision whether to go home or not. But the human, the narrator at the end, is also left with the decision to make. Do I find somebody that I can call out to, right? Whereas the cat, it's a little more physical. The cat has to physically leave the fireflies to go indoors. But if we make it more like the cat's exploring the outside world, going inside, we could also parallel that to that the cat, it has conflict and it has to make a choice, right? Um, and it needs to return to the indoor and the familiar. And there's a point here where let's see if I can find it. Let me change the color of the pen. Wait, I got my pen upside down. Let me change the color of the pen to let's do green. Okay, so okay, there's one point here where it says into the steady circle of lights. Okay, that's in contrast to this spectacle going on with the fireflies. So they're both lights, but it's talking about the steady circle of lights. This could be like a porch light that wraps around or something. And it's kind of implying there's some language there that, you know, home is consistent and steady, but outside is kind of exciting, kind of things like that. So there's that conflict going on as well, using the lights, right, as the symbolism there, that one is flickering, exciting outside, you know, live free kind of thing, and the other is the comfort of home, static, not changing kind of a thing. So there's things like that that happen as well. Um, uh, so at one level, this seems to be the topic seems to be the cat, right? And what about the cat? The cat needs to make a choice about whether to return or not. Do this self-reflection, if you will. Okay. But there's a deeper level here too, which deals with the connection, right? The how is the neighbor connected to the cat, and vice versa. And then at that end point, we have some issues to deal with, because now the narrator is putting themselves in the shoes of the neighbor and the cat even, which is, hey, what if I had somebody to call home? What if I had somebody to love? What if I could be needed backwards, and so on or whatever. So there's more of something dealing with that kind of notion. It's more abstract than just the topic is the cat. And what about the cat? The cat needs to make a choice about the conflict of going home or not, right? So that's the top level thing. But if we kind of go deeper into the actual meaning of, it's about and that taps back into the loneliness part as well, right? Is it about that? Is it about longing for somebody? And if maybe that's even the end where the narrator is thinking about what the neighbor's doing, about watching TV, kind of while waiting for the cat to come home. It could be the neighbor's longing for the cat. And then finally the narrator's like, hey, what about me? Can I be somebody? Can I be validated? Can I be all this kind of stuff like that? Okay. All right. So that's the analysis of the poem. Um, the poem name is At Dusk. The name itself doesn't really help us too much on the plot line or the summary or the theme or the main idea. But it does set the setting, and it also sets the tone a little bit. It's a less busy part of the day. Um, People are out chilling, all that kind of stuff like that. All right, so all right, so I'm going to end this here and split the questions. Like I said, SHSAT questions and the others. And let me bring back my email to this if anybody needs to contact me. And I might merge these all together anyway, depending how long everything ends up being. All right. So I'll see you with the two sets of questions, one being the SHSAT questions and the other the New York State exam questions. All right, so we're gonna jump into doing the questions for this At Dusk poem. Like I said, we're gonna start with the SHSAT ones, and then end up with the New York State exam ones. They don't really overlap to two sets of questions. I just quickly skimmed at them, so that's kind of good. So we can explore the poem a little more detailed. I find the New York State was a little more vague, but they're still good for the exploration that we're gonna do. So let me try to get loaded here. Um, All right, that's the questions. 1 second here. All right, so we have a split screen. We're gonna have the poem at the top. Give me 1 more second again. I wanna line up my tabs better on my side. Is that gonna work? Yeah, let's see here, Sue. Which lines from the poem best support the idea that the neighbor's efforts to call the cat home directly affect the speaker? All right. So that was one of the last things we kind of talked about, which is when we ended the poem up. At the end, we were talking about how it got the narrators to start thinking like, hey, what about me? And how about if I had somebody to kind of call? So that's more along where we're trying to end up being. Okay. So these are all quotes from the poem ABCD, and we're trying to find a one that really taps into that last thought of how could the speaker have somebody to call home, if you will, and so on or whatever. All right. At first, I think she is calling a child, my neighbor Sue. We find out that the neighbor calls the cat, and that's not it. Okay. Um. Let's see. I need to hold on a second. I changed the color of the pen to something better here. Because that lime green is not going to be strong enough. Yikes. Okay, so we got rid of A. Nope, I'm clicked on the wrong thing. Hold on. Okay, so got rid of A. Which line best supports the neighbor's effort to affect the speaker? The high-pitched wheedling sent out to call the animal. No, that's about the neighbor and the cat, not about the speaker, so it's not B either. I listened to my neighbor's voice trail up. She was giving up calling for now. That does give the author a little bit a point of reflection. It, like I said, it did introduce a little turning point area right there. But we're still trying to figure out actually affecting the speaker, right? So C doesn't do that. So through a process of elimination, we're left with D. We don't accept that answer. We're going to try to prove it. It left me, the narrator, to wonder that I too might lift my voice for somebody out there. Okay, and the author is using somebody and not the cat, but the notion is there. Just, it could be a child, it could be a husband, it could just be the neighbor even. Just, I don't know if this is how literal to take D or the original line from the passage, but that's it. That's affecting the speaker because it's getting to the think, hey, what about me kind of a thing, right? So that's a valid kind of a thing there. So that 19 wasn't too bad. 20. The isolation of the words here. So if we come to here, it's gonna be this here, right? They put the dashes around them. The M dashes are around it. We send out the wheedling we send out to animals who know only sounds, not the meanings of words, nor how they sometimes fall short. And they're giving an example of that there. Okay, all right. So there's that. So the isolation of the words here in line 7 contribute to the meaning of the poem. So that's a pretty gosh darn grand leap. That just going here or here, kitty, is changing the meaning of the poem. So I'm not sure. I think the test writers may have gotten a little carried away here, but nonetheless, let's give it a shot. It demonstrates how people try to communicate in familiar ways, but are still sometimes misunderstood. So this is somebody calling out to their cat. I don't think this is what really is going on here. So this doesn't seem to be the answer. The cat should be familiar with here, here, and that kind of language. The neighbor probably does it all the time, and the cat comes. I don't know if the cat understands the actual words, and that's what it's saying here on this part right here. Okay, they don't particularly understand the meaning of the words, so they fell short. But if you tell a dog like park, the dog's gonna get happy. The dog's gonna go get its leash and bring it over. It understands. It makes that connection. Maybe not think through the same conscious level that humans do, but it's not unaware of it either. Or if you say treat, the thing's gonna be jumping up and down, right? Same with a cat. Although cats are a little more fuzzy and kind of buzz off, bro, kind of thing. But there's that. So E does not seem to be, the here is not contributing to the meaning of the poem by showing how people communicate and that they're misunderstood, right? The cat did ignore the woman because it didn't know what she was saying. The cat didn't ignore the woman at all. It actually made a choice between staying with the fireflies or coming back home. Okay? The isolation of here contributes to the meaning of the poem mainly by showing how people can feel desperate to connect with others, but give up quickly when their first attempts are ignored. So, a couple of problems with that. First of all, we don't really know how long the woman tried to call the cat. If we take it at face value, it doesn't seem like she tried too hard. And if she does this every evening, we have no clue that the narrator watches the person do this all the time. But this seems to be a one-off kind of a thing, and maybe the narrator is new to the neighborhood because they also were not sure if they were calling a child initially as well. Again, they could have a child too, and the neighbor didn't know which they were calling initially. But this and that, between this and that, um, I don't think it was about a first attempt being ignored. The cat is probably temperamental, as cats often are, and things like that. Okay, it's showing how people feel desperate to connect with others. So even though I mentioned the notion of loneliness and so on, um, the here, just saying here, kitty, kind of a thing, that is not showing that at all. So it's not F. Okay, G, using the unspoken bond between the neighbor and her cat. So there's definitely probably an unspoken bond between her cat to highlight the the understanding people have with their pets. Okay, so that's kind of weirdish. If it would be the answer, I'd be like, wait a second, hold on. So I think there is an unspoken bond between the cat and the neighbor. But if we actually look at what's said in that part here, from here to say here, um, it's saying the animal only knows the sound, not the meaning of it. Okay, so if we're going to talk about making a connection, no, the connection's almost innate. The cat hears here, and it thinks there's food or something like that, and it comes running. There's, I think we're really grasping at things that are not particularly here. Okay, but there's two parts to this. There's the first part, and then the Bart part, and I think both of those kind of fail. So F is uh, just no good. Wait, I'm on G. Hold on. Using the unspoken bond between the neighbor and cat to highlight the understanding people have with their pets. So this understanding people have with their pets could go both ways. The person understanding the pet and the pet understanding backwards. But again, just like I was saying about F, even though it was on G already, I think that's kind of broken. So G just doesn't seem to be it. Again, H by process of elimination. So let's prove it. It illustrates the use of a simple expression. Here is a simple expression. To call home those who are loved and missed. So the neighbor obviously cares for the cat, calling it back in for the night, the evening, and there's really nothing there. So again, I think the test writers kind of went beyond um, kind of the normal cognitive level here, where because I don't apply a super deep meaning to this. I mean, it is making connection between how the story lays out and so on, but and there's not much to the story, so it is, in a way, it's a significant part of the story. But just yelling out here, I don't neither know is here nor there. So I don't place much emphasis in it contributing to the meaning of the poem.
But if it applied in meanings to the poem, it would be H. It's just a simple expression, especially that the person was wheedling it. They didn't go out and go scream hysterical, here, here, you lousy cat, or something or whatever, right? So they're just, they're just doing what needs to be said. They're just um, making that. Now on the level of being isolated or desperate or lonely, if that was more of the deeper meaning, as I discussed previously, it wasn't particularly just a cat trying to make a choice whether it should stay and watch the fireflies that come home. The deeper meaning, if you will, is about that kind of connection and the want of somebody to either care for them or have them care back to you, right? So at that level, H makes perfect sense. Okay, 21. The details in 10 through 17. So 10 is going to be here. And we're going to come down to here. So this is the cat trying to make the choice about whether to keep watching the fireflies or to come home, especially in that steady circle of lights, right? So do I come home to what's comfortable and familiar with me and consistent? Or kind of do I stay outside a little longer with the excitement of the real world kind of a thing? All right. So, and again, we don't want to exaggerate this to the point of it being silly. It's just a neighbor calling a cat kind of a thing. So, um, the details on 10 through 17 about the cat convey a central idea of the poem. So I mentioned some of the ideas almost at the end of the last thing. So I'm not particularly going to repeat them. You can go look at the end of that. So showing that returning home after experiencing independence is challenging. No, I think that's going to an extreme, so it's not A. The cat does need to kind of make a choice here. Um, I don't think it's being defiant. I don't think it's being nefarious. I don't think it's being mischievous. It's just the thing is before it, and it needs to make a choice, one way or the other. So, it is experiencing independence. Okay, because it's out without a human and all that stuff, and it's got free reign to be an alley cat and a bully and all this other stuff. But I don't think it's a challenge. The cat has the fireflies right in front of him, and it's not particularly worried. There's nothing in the poem to indicate that the cat's concerned, so it does not seem to be a. B. Suggests that caring for others means allowing them to grow and roam freely. So that is also part of the story where the neighbor lets the cat go out and do stuff, but there's issues with that too. Um, and caring for others means like giving them autonomy. And I don't think that's the main idea of the story. Again, they're talking about the central idea. So that might be part of it. Obviously, the neighbor lets him out, but it doesn't seem to be that. And again, 10 through 17, the cat's already out, and it's deciding whether to come home or continue to watch the fireflies. So if we centralize on those lines, B is not really where we're at. C, implying that expecting to feel at home in the natural world leads to disappointment. So I just talked about it being challenging. The cat, I don't think, is disappointed. We could maybe push come to shove, find that the human, the neighbor, was disappointed, but the neighbor's doing small tasks. We get nothing that the neighbor's upset. The neighbor's just gonna keep chilling. It's already a chill evening. The neighbor's gonna chill. Okay, the cat didn't come home yet. It's gonna come home soon, kind of a thing. So I don't think there's any disappointment anywhere with anybody or anything like that. So seems to be out. So again, process of elimination. We're getting that last choice consistently here. Uh, emphasize the conflicting desires to return to the familiar and explore the unknown. So that is kind of where the cat's at. It's already out. We do know that it lifts its ears up. It tells us that the cat lifts the ears. Even turns toward the human, but then back to the fireflies, right? So the cat's like ice cream or chocolate kind of a situation here. So the conflict. So that might be too strong a word, but it's reasonable. It's not unreasonable. So does it go back home because the person's here, kitty, or does it just chill out and be like, hey, bro, this firefly's here, I'm staying, that kind of thing, expressing its autonomies. So 21 would give us that. And I mentioned before about the contrast between flickering constellation of fireflies, right? This line here, versus the steady circle of light, which might be on the porch or out the back window or something like that. Okay, so yeah, this stuff like that. All right, wait, I got to disconnect this. Okay, I'm back. All right, so we got 22. The phrases luminous possibilities and all that would keep her away from home. 17 through 19. So let's that. 17 starting here, from here to here, these lines. So if we start at the beginning of that sentence, it's as if the cat can't decide whether to leap over the hedge and bound back home onto the porch into the steady, consistent, quote, comforts of home lights, or stay where she is with the constellation of fireflies. Luminous possibilities flitting before her, right? So the author is playing with that luminosity of the fireflies versus the luminousness of the porch or maybe the back window or something like that. And that's the choice and the thing. And the thing in the middle is all that would keep her away from home. So this kind of the analogy of watching fireworks or something like that, right? So that is partially what's going on here. So those two phrases affect the poem by doing what? Highlighting the cat's lack of concern for the neighbor. So even though we know that the neighbor is calling the cat and the narrator is watching, um, and we know that the cat acknowledges the neighbor, I don't think there's a lack of concern, particularly. All right. The cat's just being a cat too on top of it. So E doesn't seem likely. F, implying that the speaker finds the cat's current situation interesting. So that's interesting in itself because if the narrator, if the author, speaker, or whatever didn't find the cat situation interesting, the poem in a way wouldn't have never existed. Furthermore, the at the end, the author gets introspective of themselves, like, what if I have somebody to call? So F is definitely involved in the poem, but is line 17 to 19 what F is talking about? So as attractive as F is, um, it's not what's going on in 17 through 19. Now, that could be a hard line in the sand that we have to jiggle back and forth sometimes because sometimes it asks for certain lines and we have to take the broader context into picture. And sometimes we talks about certain lines and we kind of just should focus on those certain lines. So, um, so they're asking particularly, this is almost like vocabulary in context, except this is phrases in context, right? So F is just too broad, and it's not what those two phrases are talking about, even though it talks about affecting the poem as a whole. All right. So the cat making a choice, yeah, it involves F, but I think it's getting too meandering there. Suggesting that the cat is compelled by its sense of wonder to remain outdoors. So I think that's the choice, and that literally is what the author's talking about. And that whole lines, all the lines from 17 to 19, leading up to starting at line number 13 with this, it's as if the cat can't decide thing. All right, so the cat is seeing something attractive, and it's compelled. That's a nice word. By the sense of wonder. Wow, look at the fireflies. Again, even people do this kind of a thing. So it hears the human about like, I'm gonna chill for a little while longer, right? Whether it's doing it consciously or unconsciously. So G seems attractive as well. And then 8 says, indicating that the speaker supports the cat's decision to ignore the neighbor. So this is going a little maybe too far. Even though the cat doesn't come back home, it's hard to kind of say it's ignoring the neighbor. But yeah, it did so. Um, and then it's saying that the author is supporting the cat's decision. And no, I didn't see the author saying that somewhere. Now, at the end, the author does lean on saying, I wish I had somebody to call and so on. But that is not supporting that instantaneous, right there at 17 through 19 kind of a thing. G wins that. Okay. We have 11 through 13, so it's actually going to give that to us in the boldface. So at 11 through 13 is part of what we're talking about here. We're still dwelling in this kind of area here, right? So toward the voice, then back to the constellation of fireflies, flicking near its head. So it says, read those. Which idea from the poem does the imagery? So imagine you're watching this, or you're the cat, okay? And these lines convey. The cat lacks a preference for going in or staying out. No, the cat is acknowledging what's going on here. So it has a preference. It seems like it's going to stay. So it seems like there's a choice here that the cat needs to make. We can fight about whether the cat can really make that decision or not, but we're talking in the context of what we're being told. So it doesn't seem like it's A. The cat is eager to see what happens next. Now that's interesting because if it's out and it's chilling around and it comes across the fireflies, it might stay for the fireflies. And at this point, the neighbor's gone back inside their house. So it might be like, hey, what's next kind of a thing, right? So we know the cat can't consciously think that per se, but it could be excited and is happy to be out, and it could be happy, right? That's an emotion a cat has for sure. So B seems reasonable for that perspective, but at the same time, it says, what does the imagery convey? Okay, so I'm not quite sure B maps that imagery, even though it seems to be a truism, meaning it's true. The cat wants to understand the unpredictable behavior of the fireflies. The cat's a cat, so I think C is pushing it, right? The cat is just happy to be out, and it's exploring the outside. It's definitely unpredictable behavior. The fireflies, this erratic constellation of buzzing lights. They may even be making noises. We're not told that. But it says the imagery conveys what? We don't know what the cat's thinking, and if the author explored that, we could get some insight of what at least the author thinks the cat is thinking. Or it could be a made-up story where the author is actually personifying the cat's thoughts or something like that. But that's not happening. And then D, the cat is fascinated by the natural world and finds the indoors unremarkable. So we have a choice between B and D, at least in my mind. The cat is eager to see what's next, and we kind of talked about what was good and bad about that. And D kind of has the same thing. The cat is fascinated by the natural world, right? So there's a little pushing it. It's still in a city somewhere. It's not like in the middle of a forest or the edge of the world in the middle of a jungle or something like that. So, and finds the indoors unremarkable. Well, we do have stuff to support D, because we also have the thing about the steady circle of lights on 16 and 17 there. Okay, so that's the kind of comfortable home, boring. There's lights, but they'll just stay on, right? Versus the fireflies, mapping into the natural world. So the cat is definitely content and fascinated. That might be an overuse of that word, but I think we can accept that. And that's in contrast to the eagerness to see what will happen next. So we don't know what's happening next. We only know what's happening, right? There was the point where I drew these two lines here. And in a way, that's the end of the cat part of the story. Because from here to here, talks about the neighbor, and from here to here talks about the narrator. So the cat ends at this line here. All right. So we don't know what happens next. And it's talking about the imagery conveying what? It's not going to convey what happens next. We don't know. We're never told. But we're told what's going on there, that the cat kind of looks back to the human, maybe not even seeing it, but like acknowledging the human, and then kind of just saying, I'm going to chill here. Again, the cat isn't particularly doing this consciously, but that's what the imagery is conveying. I'm going to chill out here further, so that leans on D. Let's see, we got 2 more questions here. So 24, how does the setting affect the events of the poem? All right, so the setting, we didn't talk about it. We talked about the tone earlier, but how does it affect the events of the poem? So setting normally is about a time period or a location. So this seems to be probably in a reasonably modern city. I don't know how big, whether it's a town or a city. It doesn't sound like as big as New York City, but it could be the suburbs. It's definitely not a farm or in the middle of nowhere kind of a thing, because then the neighbor wouldn't particularly be right there. It's hard to say. It seems to be in modern times. We get no indication about a car, or a boat, or a plane. At the same time, we know there's lighting and things like that, and things like that. So it's at least the end of the mid-century, last century. So 1950s onward here. In fact, let's take a peek. Oh, it doesn't give us the timeline there. Does it at the bottom? Well, it was written in 2006. That doesn't mean this. We don't know if this event's a real or not, but at least it's a modern poem. So let's see where we are. The setting. So the setting is in the evening as well, right? That's the time period of the day. The setting is in a small town, and the tone is kind of happy, if you will. We talked about it being relaxing and chill, and the kind of tone at the end deals with loneliness. The tone can sometimes give an impact on the setting. As an example of that, we could have a crowd of people quietly watching a show, and we could say the setting is in the audience. But if the people all of a sudden are screaming, dancing, stuff like that, they're happy, jubilant kind of thing is affecting the setting, where it's not just an audience anymore; it's a vibrant audience kind of a thing, right? So it's connected to it. It's not literally the setting per se, but it's there. So they're asking where the thing is and stuff. How does that affect the events of the poem? All right, so that's interesting. I like to think we can cover up the answers to some of these and kind of make a guess, but this one is pushing it too much. So it enables. So how does the setting affect the events of the poem? Which is the chronology, the plot line, the summary, things like that kind of thing it's asking us about. It enables the speaker to regularly overhear the neighbors calling her cat at dusk. So we don't know how many times the neighbor has done this, and we don't know how many times the narrator is witnessing this. So when it says it enables the narrator to regularly overhear it, no, we don't know if that's true. It sounds likely, but it's talking about actually what happened in the poem. How does it affect the actual things that happened in the poem, the events? So E is for dealing with speculation, or at least inferencing, and we don't have enough information to do that. F, it allows the speaker to observe the neighbor quietly without interacting with her. Yes, that absolutely happens. We can double check that guy. So we have no notion that the neighbor ever sees the narrator watching them. But the narrator, the speaker, seems to know everything that happened, even watching the cat and so on. So, and if we kind of do a play-by-play, it says, how does the setting affect it? So I laid out previously how the yards or whatever might be interconnected. So how does that setting, that the neighbor might be in the backyard or looking out the back window, how does that affect what transpires. So the author is watching what's happening, right? So it enables the author to observe the neighbor quietly. So the narrator does not interfere with the neighbor or the cat without interacting with her. So that is absolutely true. So let's see if it's the best reasonable thing they're giving us. How does the setting affect the events? It shows how living in close proximity, in other words, they're house to house or backyard to backyard or whatever, or they're close enough that she can hear the neighbor calling the cat. So how does it? It shows how living in close proximity, that's a vocabulary word that you guys should know, helps the speaker feel connected to the neighbor. So this might be pushing it. I don't know that the narrator particularly feels connected to the neighbor. We know that the neighbor's connected to the cat and vice versa. And we know at the end the neighbor wants to kind of make a connection to somebody or something at least. But this is talking about the speaker connected to the neighbor. Now they're connected enough that at the end the speaker is thinking about, should I have a connection? So at least there was inspiration that way, but it kind of happened through osmosis. So the answer does not seem to be G. And then we'll be left with H through process of elimination. And again, we got to prove these guys. So how does the setting affect the events of the poem? It shows how feeling isolated causes the speaker to imagine interactions with the neighbors. All right, so that's not happening either. All right, so we can get rid of H. I just said process elimination, but I had F there, didn't I? So F was the double check. Let's see if it makes sense. How does the setting, the location, the time period affect the things that transpired in the poem? It shows that the speaker is able to observe what's happening in the neighborhood, in particular about the neighbor and the cat, and just do so chill, right? They're just chilling at the back porch, sipping iced tea or something like that. They didn't have to go out of their way with binoculars or spy equipment or some nonsense like that. So, all right, so that's where we're leaning with that guy. And then the last question, finally, the poet develops a theme, all right, about making connections with others, mainly through that. So this is what I was talking about earlier, where I'm not really going to particularly review the main idea. You can go back and replay that part, but it appears the topic is the cat, and what about the cat? The cat has to make a choice whether to come back or not. But if you go deeper into it, especially with what's happening with those two kind of turning points I put at the end, from here to here, and then from here to here, okay, it's really, this is about connections. So one is the neighbor's connection to the cat and vice versa. And it's also about the narrators wanting a connection, kind of a thing. All right. So that can be, this one could be a tough one. So it might be the hardest question of all. So let's see. The poet develops a theme about making connections with others, mainly through exploring the desires of the speaker and the neighbor. All right. So that's a bit vague, but at the same time, and I don't know if it's exploration of the desires of the speaker independently and the neighbor independently, or them together. So there's a little part of that there, right? So, but that happens. The speaker's observations. So the poet develops a theme about making connections by the speaker's observations of the sights and sounds in the neighborhood. So in and of themselves, that does happen. This is true. That is something that happens in the poem. But the sights and sounds alone is not about connections. All right. So the operative word of the question. Whoops. Hold on. My thing is messing up. Is the word connections. So I don't see that B does that. The speaker develops a theme about making connections by speculating. The speaker makes speculations. The speaker makes about what the neighbor does inside the house. So again, what the narrator is assuming the neighbor is doing inside the house is definitely speculation. And a lot of it's menial, like watching TV, doing small chores. I think it said, where was that again? the line 24, and maybe just walking around the house. They could be pacing, waiting for the cat. They could be upset, or they just could be, maybe they're just tidying up. I would want it to say they were tidying up, but there's that kind of thing. So connections. So it develops a thing about connections, about what the neighbor's doing inside their house. That's not really connection. In fact, it's not at all. So it's not C. We're left with G then at that point. We have A still. The poet develops a theme about making connections through the speaker's explanations of the cat's thoughts and actions. So this is pushing it too much, because a cat's a cat again. And even though there is some exploratory verbiage, text narrative about that, it seems that there's multiple connections going on. One is the cat to the human, the other is the human to the cat, the other is the two neighbors to each other, and the other is the speaker longing for a connection. All right, so I think just focusing on the cat is not the theme. All right, so we can throw out D and we're left with the A. So the poet develops a theme about making connections with others, mainly through the exploration of the desires of the speaker and the neighbor, right? Especially those last two parts there, from line 20 onward. That's kind of really what's giving us a. All right, so those are the SHSAT questions, I believe. Yeah. And I will do another part of this with the New York State questions thrown in. All right, y'all. See you in a second. Mentioned there's also this poem was also used in the 2019 grade 7 New York State ELA exam. And so we're going to explore some of those questions here. Let me turn on my tablet for a second. All right, so we're just going to jump into these. I'm not going to give full essay answers, particularly here, because we've pretty much talked about a lot of the aspects of this, even though these are not particularly repetitive questions. So how does the poet's word choice in the beginning of the poem establish the mood? So the word choice in the beginning of the poem established the mood of the poem. All right, so we talked about the poem starting out kind of chill in the neighborhood that they're in. It's relaxing. It seems like just a melancholy summer day, a lazy day of summer, if you will. And the fireflies are out. There is that in the beginning. Now, we did talk about the connections at the end that do happen. So there's concerns possibly of loneliness or longing for somebody to call home and things like that. And we could argue that the beginning of the passage is introducing that kind of notions to us. So, but it definitely starts out more relaxing and a chill kind of thing. And we would find quotes for that. They, in this case, they want you to use two references: the SHSAT or the Hunter College High School exam. The two I'm really focusing on doesn't deal with the specificity of that kind of a thing here. So, but you would mention things about how the neighbor was just chill, leaning out the doorway, the nice here kind of a thing. The cat didn't come, so the neighbor just went back inside. They were not excited, right? They just watched TV. So that's all a chill kind of relaxing experience, and things like that. And that's really all they're looking for here. And for anybody who actually does the New York State exams, they're not looking for huge, giant answers. I've seen students not leaning on writing tomes for these, and it's not what they want. They want you to get the essence of what the passage is about, the essence of the answer to the question, and just totally focus on that. You're not doing filler stuff. You're not writing a full-blown essay here. You're just answering the question. You really don't even need an introduction or a conclusion. Just focus on the two details, answer the question literally, and focus on the two details. That's all they're asking. 37 says in this poem, how does the shift that begins in 21 affect the meaning of the poem? So we did touch on this a little bit going through the other question there, right? So we're talking about what's happening in the neighborhood and that somebody should be calling their home. So let's see, where are we? That begins on 21. So 21 is this first turning point here, if you will. All right, where the cat is basically ending the story, and the neighbor is the narrator is considering what the neighbor might be doing in their house. Okay, and then it says how to affect the meaning of the poem. So that was kind of interrelated to what the SHSAT was thinking there. So first of all, the author is beginning to wonder, and the author is kind of making connections to people. So there's things like that. There's also the notion of the possible notion that the neighbor's lonely and the narrator is lonely, right? So you might even say, why does the narrator and neighbor try to meet and connect or whatever? But they're talking about what's happening right then and there in the neighborhood, live on the spot, if you will. And there's gotta consider what happens. Since the deeper we talked about what the theme was, it was really about calling somebody home, right? That's the essence of the passage. It's not about a cat making a decision whether to go home. It's really about what the longing of the people, right? So there's that kind of a thing. So that's how it affects the meaning of the poem. The speaker is coming into an awareness of, should I call somebody home? And again, it's asking for two details, and we could support that up, especially the lines going from 25 on, but that's literally the narrator speaking from himself at that point. Okay, there's like that. Okay. Last in the poem, how does the speaker's thoughts reveal about her concerns about home? So this is everything we've been talking about. The whole poem is an entity, right? And the speaker is probably the poet, right? So how does it affect their own thoughts? This is a point of view question, right? Concerning home. So they're talking about home being comfortable and things like that too. They're also talking about outdoors being more exciting, perhaps. So they're also talking about this longing and loneliness, perhaps, again, to bring somebody back home. And again, the last few lines there is where we can kind of get that thing there. And it's about making choices about whether to stay outside, come inside, but also bringing somebody in, right? There's the cat versus the neighbor, right? The cat can choose to come home or go out. The neighbor can also choose to let the cat come home, but it's the calling home of somebody that you love or care for kind of thing, and that they would come home. Right now, I believe the cat would eventually come home, but at the last part from 25 on in the poem, it's about the speaker kind of longing for that capability, like, hey, what about me, kind of a thing, right? So there's that kind of notion that comes up here, and especially the last line there about certainly the sounds I make are enough to call somebody home. They're thinking, is this something I could do? Is this a space I could be in? Things like that. That's 38. And again, you would give the two references, and yeah, that's the end of that. So all right, guys. So if you guys need to contact me, my my email's at the bottom there, and hopefully this has been helpful. I'm gonna do a bunch more of these. Like I said, I did about a dozen, and probably gonna do at least another half a dozen. All right, peace, y'all.